Hi, I'm Blake. This is Mock. That's Dylan, and this is the SportsForecast podcast. It's a mouthful.
You know, I was actually I brought up the name of someone earlier, and I was told that SportsForecast podcast was redundant, so maybe.
Yeah, might change
the
the
SportsForecast
without the podcast.
Correct.
Yeah, that's all right.
Anyways,
we still got we got time.
I will figure it out. Don't worry.
Still working on it.
Second?
Anyways.
First podcast? Come on now.
Anyways, we'd like to start off this podcast by defining a sport.
Because, of course, the sports podcast, we got to start with the basics.
We got to set our boundaries. What are we going to talk about? What we're not going to talk about.
So, usually the baseline of sports is typically thought of the Olympics.
Yes.
The Olympics is where all people of all nations and all races come together to compete in what people deem sports.
Exactly.
Now, after further reviewing the list of Olympic sports,
after further review, literally on the field,
it has come to our attention that there might need to be a more specified definition of sports. Now, I'll pop up the Google definition currently of what a sport is. The definition of sport is currently an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment.
Mark, you got some thoughts about that?
It's too broad.
I agree.
It's too broad. I agree that entertainment's a part of sport.
Yeah.
But, again, the whole thing was an activity involving physical exertion.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that involve
activity.
physical exertion. Technically, sleeping also involves physical exertion. That's not a sport, is it now? Come on.
I
agree.
That's too broad in my opinion.
I mean, you could watch anybody, working out and for entertainment. But
Yeah.
Is that a sport?
That's not a sport.
Unless you're talking about competitive weightlifting, that's what we got to find out today is what is a sport.
What is a sport
and what isn't a sport?
Also, just before we
For the
start,
record.
this is our opinion. This is not factual at all.
Exactly.
This is just what we think.
We're not backed by any sources or whatever.
Yeah.
We didn't do any research on this.
We're just three dudes that have an opinion. It's not.
Correct.
17-year-olds with
we want to create a more
pretty big
refined definition for the teenage boy demographic who probably shares opinions with us.
Yeah, because I'm sure we're not alone in.
Definitely not.
We're curious to see who would agree and disagree, and we'd see like to see for what reasons you'd agree or disagree with us.
So first of all, I think we need to come up with what our definition of sports is.
Our definition of a sport.
So I think we need to look at different sports and what they include, and by the end we should come up with a new definition.
Yeah,
now,
by the end of this we'll figure.
After
one out.
talking earlier, we talked about sports such as figure skating and dance, which involve judges deeming whether a team is worthy to beat another team based on a judge determining a victory.
An opinionated
thing.
Yeah.
Not a referee.
Now, referees, we also determine referees can have effects on games. However, they do not solely determine the outcome of a game.
Yeah.
They may play a
They
factor.
may play some factors, but
however,
if one team's really
they impact the game, but you still got to score on your own.
Yeah.
But the sports in question here are sports that are solely determined by a judge giving you a score, which would in turn declare a winner.
Yep.
We previously deemed that these sports are not actually sports. That is our opinion, and we have deemed any sport
not backed by any source.
It's judged
It's not.
Is not a sport. Now everyone can share their own opinions. I'd like to hear what did we talk about before? So why is a sport being judged by a judge not actually a sport?
Because that's so the sports that we know for definite, like basketball, football, soccer, right? That is your own ability to put the ball in the hoop or to kick a soccer ball into a net.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not judged. It's a pretty clear scoring system in all those sports. In figure skating, it's someone else's opinion of what you scored. You didn't, it's not like you did a backflip or whatever in gymnastics. How do we know which one's better? Which one's a 10, which one's an 8, or however they score it?
Yeah.
That's not fair. And also, when you got judges, there's bias.
There's a lot of
bias.
And every time I watch the Olympics, they always talk about questionable scores and stuff like that. And that
the gray area in that is just way too big.
If a ref has a questionable call, yes, it could affect a game. But if a judge has a questionable call, that is literally the whole that's
the outcome of the game.
Entire
and you look at media and consumer bias also in those. You look at Adam Rippon, who is the figure skater in the Olympics for the United States, who is openly gay.
Yeah.
And you look at that and how much hype was behind him, and that created a bias in itself. Everyone wanted him to win and wanted to see him.
Or what if you got
successful?
a judge that's against gay people. Like
Correct,
Exactly.
and
all of a
it could
sudden,
be the opposite. If
the
someone
same backflip is not worth whatever the same move is
Correct.
not worth the same amount of points all of a sudden.
No, you could have a referee in a
difference.
football game who's officiating a Jets-Giants game, and one person might hate the Jets, but one ref can't solely determine
Exactly.
the end of
There's
the game.
still so many plays after that. That's
And,
it's
yes,
just,
and
one
obviously,
play doesn't
if
determine
they
it.
call penalties every play, it's gonna be noticed,
gonna be
and it's gonna be
chaos.
taken
Exactly.
care of by the league.
Exactly.
But these sports in question are totally determined by a judge. So, what would we call these? I was thinking we'd be called competitive activities. Now,
Competitive activities. That's funny.
Another competitive activity used to be something like jump roping. Who could get more jump ropes? Something like that.
That's true. You're not gonna say jump roping's like.
You're not
going to
say jump roping.
But
is
it's
a
not
sport.
judged by someone either, though.
Street
It's not
racing,
judged.
competitive activity. It's not. Street racing isn't a sport. It's a competitive activity.
Is NASCAR
So,
a
okay,
sport?
so that's what I was gonna say. Here's sports that don't have a judge. NASCAR doesn't have a judge. Boxing has a judge. But
But you can
consider it
still
a
knock
sport.
somebody. Yeah, but
But like I mean, without knockouts, there is a judge in boxing. Do we count that as a sport?
I feel like we need to talk about that.
about boxing,
Boxing.
just all combat sports, or like in general.
Okay,
Well, yeah,
I
'cause,
feel like
wrestling, we consider those to be like by the general
Same with like
popularity.
UFC if it goes the distance.
But,
Yeah,
are,
exactly.
but are those
To
judges?
judge.
Are those are those referees? Because
No, they have,
in
like-
wrestling, there's a referee that gives you points, but that's not like the same points like a judging points. Like there's actual rules.
Yeah,
like a takedown
like
is
you-
2 points.
But in boxing, a referee is only there to
Prohibit.
control the game, prohibit
Yeah,
any illegal
basically.
activities.
And then it
on
is
the
the
Yeah.
judges in
It
the
is
end.
at the end of the day, yeah. If a fight goes 12 rounds, guess
Oh,
who's
boy.
gonna decide the
It's,
winner?
yeah,
This-
it's
this is
Triple
good.
G, like a Triple G Canelo fight. There's a lot of controversy.
This is
because the
becoming a
judges-
slippery slope here because there could be so many exceptions to this rule.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, yeah.
I think we all need to say right now, boxing is for sure a sport.
I'd agree.
However,
But it
there
goes
is
against our
There's
definition.
there's an argument. Using
because-
our
okay.
logic, you could argue against.
Yeah, so
that
just to
it's
be
a
clear,
sport.
our definition is if it has a judge. If a sport has a judge, it's not. We don't consider it a sport. It's a competitive activity.
Well,
That's the one.
I guess if it has a judge that solely decides
that-
the outcome
right,
of the sport, because
Right.
boxing, you can obviously still get knocked
Knocked
out, and
out.
that's one athlete beating another
and
athlete.
they don't solely decide.
Yeah.
They're not the only factor because it also plays a physical part.
In
Because
your
if you could
ability.
physically
Your
determine,
ability to
Yeah.
get hits
if you
and
could
everything.
cause your opponent to become ineffective throughout the match and
Knock him
they
down.
knock him down,
Yeah,
correct? Then
stuff
you
like
determine
that.
the match.
What about something like Taekwondo?
That's it's called a mixed martial art. An art. Now,
Art.
That's it's in the name.
Now,
That's not
but
a that's
It's in the name.
Yeah.
I
It's in
feel
the
as
name.
though Taekwondo is in the name. Now, if Taekwondo was actually used as it's taught, person v person,
Exactly.
people are fighting to almost the death, in Taekwondo.
Yeah.
I feel like that'd be more of a sport. But the
But how
fact
it
that
is
it's
now.
the
You can't
fact
do
that it's
that,
more
though.
like slashing wood and kicking high stuff.
That's gonna piss some people off.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. I feel like the baseline of Taekwondo should be a sport if it was used in real life scenarios. If people were put against each other using their Taekwondo skills against each other, like you see in one of those movies. Anyways, I feel
Which one?
Karate Kid.
Karate Kid.
So you're saying just one-on-one, whoever
Yeah.
gets knocked out first
Yeah.
Correct.
wins.
I feel like part of our definition should include individual one-on-one physically exerting sport activities should be deemed sports. That's boxing, wrestling,
So is Taekwondo a sport?
UFC, Taekwondo, if used in that scenario. Now that's what we need to get to next. Sports, there's broader sports categories that have subcategories, like skiing, for example. We've talked about how skiing, some parts of skiing are a sport, other
parts
parts
just a
of
leisure
skiing
activity.
are activities.
Some would say a hobby.
Now, we
Tell 'em.
determined that cross-country skiing is a sport. Now, it's people
sure.
racing against each other to get to an end goal in a certain amount of time,
and that's
that takes
physically
training.
exerting.
That's
That's
for
physically
sure.
exerting. However, downhill skiing, where you do some jumps and stuff, that's rated by a judge.
So is that a sport?
That's
I mean,
more of an
it's hard to
activity.
it's
definition.
still,
I don't
it's
think
still
so.
athletic.
Because-
Like, you're still based off of your own athletic ability, but someone else is judging your performance.
I believe like the different skiing moves have different points. I believe like certain flips give certain amount of points, and the judges are supposed to deem that. However, I just feel like those kinds of things should not be sports.
Like,
I
yeah.
feel like
Yeah.
it needs to be, like the definition said, competition against a team or an individual. But that's not really competing against each other. You're kind of competing
That's
to
a
get
judge.
the
Against-
judge
yeah,
and
you're-
give you a
yeah,
good
you're
score.
just
You're competing for
competing for the
yourself,
judge,
and the
exactly.
judge is going to see what happens. So you want to try to get the judge's best opinion rather than beating out someone else.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you
So, then there's a slippery slope because then you got boxing. Now, boxing, it is a sport.
Yeah,
Has
for
to be
sure.
sport.
Yeah, it's got to be.
I can see the argument using our definition if someone said it's not a sport.
Yeah,
It's
there's
like,
definitely an argument, but
Now,
'cause we said if
obviously,
you have judges, it's not a sport.
the
but
fact that if you could by yourself
someone else.
beat your opponent, that's got to be.
or
a
just like
sport.
physically dominate your opponent
yeah.
all game long.
Yeah.
So it's
Correct.
like you obviously won.
Yeah.
we also come up. We believe racing is a sport. Now, racing between living
Track.
humans,
Track is a
such
track.
as
Yeah, track and field.
track and field hurdling, which is included in that. Like cross country skiing, I think cycling definitely a sport. You got to be.
Yeah,
Gotta
you got to
be
be an
decent to be
athlete for
cycling.
sure.
I know NASCAR takes skill. I know you got to know the drifts.
Yeah,
you got to know the ins and
Listen.
out.
Yeah.
NASCAR is a
But-
sport. Your boy should be in the Olympics for driving.
You know,
I'm just saying.
yeah, come on.
I'm an extreme driver in that. I'm an extreme athlete.
And it does
If
involve
NASCAR is a
physical
sport.
exertion. Now, when you're going at those high G forces,
With our definitions, with like what we've said, NASCAR is a sport.
It
With
falls
our
under- yeah, it
definitions,
falls
so
under- 'cause it
far.
doesn't have a
So
judge.
far.
Because you're competing against other people, like it's physically exerting. Like
it is physically exerting.
There's
It's
no
all
judge.
mentally exerting,
There
dude.
is no
Yeah.
judge, correct. But I feel like there should be something deemed that vehicles that allow inhumane physical activities, like nobody could run 100 miles an hour,
Yeah, 80,
Exactly.
100, yeah.
should be considered a sport. But then you could also argue cycling. People are going up to 30 miles an hour. But you're controlling those. They're technically
that's you
bicycles are
but-
technically vehicles.
But to be fair, you move the cycle on your own with your own legs by pedaling and all
Yes,
that
you
stuff.
move the
Like,
car. I mean,
well, you push your
you
push your foot down on a pedal. That doesn't count.
But the engine moves it for you.
That is,
Yeah,
like, you know what I
that
mean. Like that
yeah.
doesn't count.
So, our definition is now expanded to vehicular activities should not be deemed sports, as it is.
that's particularly NASCAR.
but you just
not
said
human.
cycling. That's a vehicle, right?
Vehicles that
That
are not
you
directly
move.
controlled by the physical
Yeah.
abilities of a living person.
Agreed. You just gotta
That
make
is a
sure
tough.
to
That is
Yeah.
a tough.
those exceptions.
That is a
So
tough
NASCAR
one,
street racing eliminated.
All right, I got
Rally eliminated.
one for you
gone.
guys.
All right.
though. Go ahead.
Archery/shooting in the Olympics. Is that a sport?
I'm a huge fan of archery because I watch Arrow. So I'm
So you're
biased, so
gonna
I'm
say
biased
it's-
towards it. I'm gonna say yeah. No, I'm kidding. No, You're not in archery. You're not judged by another person though.
Yeah, I mean it's
It's your
purely
skill
yourself, same
and
with shooting.
how accurate you are as a shooter, as an archer.
Yeah,
Like,
you're
And
going
that's not
against other
judged. That's you
people.
look at the target, and that you know who won, obviously.
So that's a
Yeah.
sport.
Yeah,
Are we
so
doing that
so the
as
sports
sport?
we have is biathlon, archery, and competitive shooting are all in the Olympics. Those all involve hitting a target with a certain amount of accuracy.
Yeah.
I believe that is a sport. If you've ever fired a rifle or a bow before, you got to know accuracy is not just a given.
Yeah.
That's something that takes practice and physically exerting. You have to build and know how to use those tools.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that should definitely be a sport. It's also physically exerting. You know, holding up a firearm for a distant amount of time, going from target to target, firing, and staying accurate in that period of time is
Yeah,
physically
that's-
exerting. Same with
this is
archery.
a-
You have to be decently strong enough to pull the arrow back anyways. If you've ever tried, it's not as
yeah,
easy
it's
as
not
I've
it
done
is.
easy
it a
as
couple
you
times.
think.
It's not. It's
And
not
maintaining
easy to do.
accuracy under that pressure too, I believe that's for sure a sport there.
All right.
Fencing.
Fencing. What?
Fencing
we
is-
we forgot about that. Is that a combat sport?
It's 1-on-1. Like, remember I said for boxing.
Yeah.
Man,
You're-
fencing has been around since
It's old school.
it's an
Fencing-
old, it's
fencing
an
is
old
really-
I mean,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
similar. I mean, to me, like it was similar to like. It looks kind of like wrestling with just like
It does.
the point system and like you just like
It does.
are I don't know dueling somebody.
And with that, like the judges are looking for specific things to give points to. Now, as long as that's the case, it should still be a sport. As long as the judge still
So
doesn't
judges
solely
involved,
determine.
there's a
But there still is the
big
judge
chance of
factor.
human error
Yeah.
and whatnot. So what do we do? What do we deem in that?
I think fencing is more of an activity, in my own opinion. I believe it's more toward the downhill skiing
did you
side,
call it?
where they look
Yeah.
for different things to see, and they give different points for different
Yeah.
gestures or maneuvers that they do, because that's what they're looking for to judge. Now, that's my opinion. I believe it falls under the category of leisure activity.
Not
leisure,
competitive,
but competitive activity.
Competitive activity.
I like that name.
I would say
That's
I
something under.
do agree with the fact that it's like I think it's very close though between
that is a
competitive
borderline
activity and sport. Like I think that's pretty borderline. I don't know. It could go either way for me, honestly.
That is quite borderline. I agree. Another one that's a hot topic is the dance cheerleading area.
Okay, let's just get right into it then. Let's just start.
We have to start out. That is definitely physically exerting. You can't deny.
Yeah.
Dance and cheer.
I couldn't
Yeah.
reach earlier.
Takes-
It
It takes
gotta
physical
lift
exertion.
people up. Yeah.
But so does the other things we deemed not to be sports. Fencing and downhill skiing. You have to know what you're doing and be physically prepared for those competitive activities.
But you're being judged.
Dance is an art. That's just what it is. If I was a dancer, I wouldn't want people calling it a sport. I feel like it's definitely an art form. Like, why would you? I don't know why all the dancers are really wanting it.
So we have
to
a sport in the
be called
Olympics called gymnastics rhythmic, and that's essentially dancing with a streamer and getting judged for it now.
Gymnastics.
I'd love to watch that on like an ABC night show and have people judge it and sit down with my family and watch that. But I'm not gonna have my blood pressure rise and get intense watching that happen. I'm not gonna be this guy's gonna win and I'm not gonna get excited. It's just gonna be more of this is wonderful. This should be in a museum kind of golf clap kind of deal.
I don't see a situation in which I'm watching that personally. I guess
the Olympics did add breakdancing to their.
But you have to
roster,
admit, both dance and cheerleading take a tremendous amount of practice and skill. We cannot deny that.
doubt.
They're definitely physically exerting in that scale. But
For sure.
the fact that a judge determines the successfulness of those practices, you gotta admit, all those dancers are putting in the same amount of effort. You could say that with any sport, though. Everyone's putting the same amount of effort.
Mm-hmm.
But when other sports like football or baseball or basketball, it comes down to in-game decisions or the execution of that practice. Now, it does in dancing and cheerleading too, but then it's not just you deciding what's happening. It's a judge. It is a judge deciding the end of a game. Now, if you're in a football game, you are deciding what your fate is. You have to remember what you've been executing, remember what you're practicing, and adjust to what the other team's doing. How can you adjust to the other team's doing when you're the only one performing, being judged by a judge who is not, going against you? Besides the fact that they're grading you. So since the judge is solely determining the outcome of that event, it should be deemed a competitive activity.
So I've been to cheer competitions. I have 2 sisters, and I've been to my fair share. And every team, whatever, goes and does their little routine, and it just comes out to everybody sitting and just like waiting to hear what the judges think. And after every time, if they lose, it's blame the judges, or if they win, it's like the judges made a call, and that can't be like. I just don't think that can be a sport.
And it shouldn't be a sole determining factor. Now, you could say, for example, in the Saints-Rams game, that call was a sole determining factor in the game. But you look at overtime.
Hypothetically,
it was.
That's what I'm saying. You can look at other parts
Who
of the game.
knows if
Drew
they would
Brees doesn't
score
throw
that
the interception
football.
in overtime.
Yeah.
That they still could have won that game.
Yeah.
Or
These
even
sports, you have to look at other factors. But if these sports, you can only look at the judges to see what the outcome is. You could also look. You could say you poorly executed what you've been practicing. Mm-hmm. But even then, the fact that a judge determines that it's this competitive activity.
For sure.
That's a good point.
I agree.
What's
Marching band.
marching band? No.
I mean, it's under the same category as what
It falls under competitive activity. Yes, it is.
Judged.
The outcome is deemed by a judge. So, Ethan, we'd like to get your opinion. You could come up here and you could discuss with us.
Do you want to? Nah.
All right, we could just talk to you from here then. So, we have deemed that something determined by a judge cannot be deemed a sport. What's your opinion on this?
Solely determined by a judge.
Solely determined by a judge. Not like a referee in a sport, but, for example, competitive figure skating, where a judge solely determines the outcome of the sport without any other factors, besides personal execution of your routine or whatever.
What about boxing and wrestling?
That's the thing that we fell under.
We
But
discussed.
you can get pinned in wrestling. You can get knocked out in boxing.
See, yeah, because those have other factors. You could get a knockout, which gives you the
There's
victory.
other
It's
ways
not
to get an
solely the
outcome
judge,
in those sports specifically.
We're talking just the judge. Like, you can't beat out, like, in dance, you can't just out
ice
dance
skating?
someone and win.
You don't think ice skating?
Figure skating.
Figure skating, but speed skating,
Speed
That's a
skating,
sport.
that's a sport.
we determine racing outside of motorized vehicles is deemed a sport. So the max you basically go with that is cycling, and that's the highest you go with any sort of vehicle being involved. So track, speed skating, cross-country skiing, cycling are all deemed sports as you have to get there faster than another person. A judge is not determining that. However,
I disagree because, well, I think that ice skating in Olympics, like dancing, you know, like those
Figure
types of
skating?
events.
Yeah.
Yeah, figure skating. Like that's a sport.
but we're not saying that it's not hard. We're not saying that it's not fun to watch, but we're saying
Our reasoning for
yeah.
saying that is because at the end of the day, the outcome is determined solely
So
by
we're saying-
another person.
so. Right now, all of those fall under the definition of sport. We're trying to make it a more specific definition and separate the competitive activities from the more physically exerting sports that are determined not solely by a judge. We're trying to
like-
make subcategories within the umbrella of the sports.
You brought up boxing, right? That they have judges, but there's also other ways to get an outcome in that besides a judge.
Correct.
Figure skating, the only way you win is if the judge
gives you a good
gives
score.
you a better score than your opponent.
There's no other factor. You can't just
Unless
go
I don't-
1v1 outskate your opponent.
Yeah.
You can't just go out there and duke it out. It's not possible. You have to rely on the judge to determine your score.
Which obviously, like, the superior
Yeah, but
skater could win.
Yeah, there's a winner still.
I mean, there's
That's
winners
decided
in other
by
activities.
That's decided by a judge, though.
There's still a winner.
There's a winner in a lot
I
of
could
things.
I could
win in apples to apples.
yeah,
Apples to apples.
I was
isn't
gonna
a
say I could
sport.
1v1 you right now in a thumb war and I could win. But does anyone want to watch that on national television? No.
You're just classifying like a knockout or a like. What are your sports then? Give me your
Better.
list of sports.
List of
So,
sports.
I mean, there's
The
there's
ones
gonna
that we
be-
decided were 50-50 were boxing, wrestling was one of them that we decided, cycling.
Those
we
are
said
all
that was a
deemed
sport.
as sports. Do you want to know
Those
what we
are all
don't
sports.
think are sports? Is that what you'd like to know?
Track, that's probably better.
Figure skating, dancing, cheerleading,
NASCAR.
NASCAR.
That's a controversial.
That was a debated one, though.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm still.
I see
sold
on
that.
I see on
NASCAR is more skill.
Oh, we also
That's a
said
good point.
ski. Some
Did you
types
guys
of
know that
skiing.
NASCAR is skill based.
we're
That was
aware of that,
it
but
is.
that was one of my
but
arguments.
we talked about
That's
No,
what
that's what I'm saying.
That was one of my
we
arguments. for it
realized
being a
that
sport.
that's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
I'm
however-
not sold on NASCAR not being a sport. Yet.
However,
That's why it's a race.
correct, but can a human really go 100 miles an hour by himself without that motor taking him that fast? We're saying it's a skill. It's not easy to be in NASCAR. However, should be under the umbrella of correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
you're right.
So another one that wouldn't be a sport would be diving.
There have been
I think diving's a sport. Oh,
You're
that's
judge.
just judges.
You're judged.
Judged by
However,
other people.
this is the thing. Swimming is a sport because it's
'Cause you're
time.
racing.
It's time you're going
Yeah.
against another person.
What did we say for fencing? Was that a sport?
We determined fencing was not a sport.
That was very borderline for me, though.
I don't know enough
yeah.
about fencing.
But
Is
there's
there?
outcomes in all these?
There's
you know?
outcomes.
There's outcomes in like that's
it's
not
about
that
how you
doesn't
get to the
determine-
outcome.
We're
yeah,
determining-
That's not
But-
determining if
So
it's
the
a sport
board.
for us.
So
It's
yeah,
about how you get
It's
to
about-
the
it's
outcome.
about- yeah.
how you get to the outcome.
correct.
That's what the judges.
I don't know enough
point
about
is
fencing.
being brought
If
up.
there is a way in fencing to achieve a
Look it up,
victory
there has to be a
without
way.
without
Can
being
you?
judged,
I don't
if
know
there's
enough
like a
about the
knockout in
sport.
fencing, then it should be considered a sport. If there's a way to overrule the judge's ruling and get a win.
What do we think about eSports?
That's exactly what they are. Just electronic sports. They're not sports.
I agree with your quotations there.
They're
Um,
sports. That's all it is.
That is something that I feel like is going to keep growing. That's an industry that is on the rise, especially with
I
kids our
love it.
age.
Yeah, I'm glad that it's a thing. I don't think you can call it a sport though.
I
It's
don't think
entertainment.
it
Yeah.
should.
It's entertainment.
It's competition for sure, because
Yeah.
people are
Well,
better
everything's
than that.
competition
But
in that case.
that's almost worse than NASCAR.
Yeah,
That
come
is
What is?
esports.
on.
that-
I like esports, but you
Different
can't.
set of skills.
It's mentally draining. That's
Yeah.
mentally draining.
I for sure think so, but I just think it's got it has its different. I don't think
But-
it's a sport. I think
but
it's
like-
got its own category.
But
like,
that's
I
not,
don't think-
it already is its own category. It has the E in front of it.
Yeah.
And it needs to stay with that E in front of it.
esports. Yeah,
It cannot
turn
merge.
into
Yeah. When you're talking about sports, we cannot be
You guys
bringing
think
up
about it being on
esports.
ESPN?
Entertainment. ESPN stands for
ESPN
entertainment
isn't
and
solely
sports
for
So I'm with
sports.
I'm
As long as they're not calling it like a sport, as long as they're not saying this is a sport and they're referencing it still as an e-sport, that still keeps it separated.
Plus, ESPN stands for Entertainment and Sports Programming Network, so
Correct.
that falls under entertainment. Like that's entertainment. Esports to me is just it's entertainment. It's fun to watch. It's a completely different set of skills, though.
I agree.
And I think those are about like most of the borderline
Yeah,
sports that
we're-
cover everything.
looking at the list of Olympic sports, that's how we're deciding this. By the way,
Olympics
Ooh.
is-
surfing.
Surfing.
That's physical exertion.
It's physical.
It's physical exertion.
But
yes.
It's also a lot of fun.
Isn't surfing judged? I believe it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's judged.
And there's no way to win in
There's
surfing
probably
besides.
Surfing's gotta be a hobby.
Because I wonder if it's through like endurance of the waves or like how
Or the
like,
tricks.
style.
Yeah.
Also, disclaimer: we're not completely educated on all these topics, so if we're spreading misinformation and we're not knowing,
They have 20 to
Enough.
30 minutes
They let us
to catch the best waves.
please let us
possible.
know. Please let us know if we're misrepresenting a sport and on how it's judged or deemed, especially in dance or cheerleading.
You can
I'm not-
disagree with anything.
I'm
that
not an
we say.
expert, but if you have like facts that disprove what we're saying, like just let us know. Like,
Yeah,
it's right now it's pretty uneducated, unopinionated.
yeah,
just like,
it's just opinions. Don't
this
take,
this is
yeah.
almost our opinions without facts at this point.
Yeah.
It's just without
take this
with,
with a
It's
grain of
raw
salt.
opinions.
I'll
That's
deem
all
this
it
the
is.
common man's opinion because we don't have much facts on many of these subjects.
The two
Calling
best.
out
You guys have
Kinda.
a background, obviously. Of
Well, yeah, I mean, we've all been
Yeah,
watching sports
but
for like
yeah.
a
I
long
haven't
time,
been
but
dancing my entire life. I don't know the ins and
Yeah.
outs.
Not a regular Olympic watcher.
So I can't really form an educated opinion on if it's a sport or not because I haven't put in the work myself.
Okay, so surfing is you get 20 to 30 minutes each surfer to catch the best waves possible. So first of all, that again out of your hands that could work against you if you don't get a good wave, and you get scored out of 20, and that's how
That
you
is
win.
true.
So again,
That's almost
first of all,
that's
there's
almost
like
like
so
luck-based
many
right
outside
there.
factors in surfing, and back to being the judge, like you're still being.
That's, I mean, with
Judged
our
by someone
definition,
else.
this shouldn't be a
doesn't
sport.
Let's talk about luck though. We talked the other day about the coin toss in the AFC Championship.
Uh-huh.
That game was solely determined by the luck of a coin toss. Should
and
should
the
luck,
offense of the Patriots and the defense of the
yeah,
Chiefs.
there was
Correct.
some
Yeah,
skill
but
involved.
I get what you're saying.
but should luck be involved in our definition of sport? I mean, all sports have luck to a certain degree, but should it be like a catching wave or a coin toss sort of luck?
I'm gonna say no.
I know. I think every sport
Everything
has
has
coin
luck.
toss. Football, you start every game with a coin toss, and you're
But
lucky
it's
the
also
receiver
fair.
kicked the ball.
It's also fair.
Yeah, but it's also
It's
the
not-
other team gets like
But,
each team
but
gets
this is
an
more
advantage.
the environment working against you, and it's more natural, and you can't really.
Yeah.
A coin
you
toss is like probably one of the most fair things. It's 50-50. Like
Yeah,
mathematically, it is a 50-50 chance.
I'd agree with that.
You get
Surfing's
either
probably
Yeah.
not
Surfing's
considered a
not a
sport.
That's gonna trigger some
Surfing's fun to watch though. I
Dude,
like
I
watching
went
surfing.
surfing
yeah.
once. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I agree.
I didn't think I
GoPro
was-
surfing videos are
But
some of the coolest videos
I
on
feel like
YouTube.
I hate to say this, but all these sports we've been talking about that are not sports, I feel like they should be considered sports just in a separate category. Because right now they still are considered sports, but I just feel like there should be two categories here. I don't feel like
what would you
they
call
should all be
one
under.
or the other?
I don't think it should be competitive activities. I just think it should be, I don't know, sports determined by judges, or I don't know how to put it. but
Yeah,
you know what I
like,
mean?
Judge based.
Because I feel like you still couldn't put them as sports. I feel like they need to be separated, and that's what I feel like should happen.
I like your first definition, competitive activities.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's a fair.
think it's
That's a
perfect,
fair
honestly.
ground
Yeah.
to like judge them on or put them on.
Because I just like, I'm not taking credit from any of these people. Obviously, like they put in work.
Yeah, they're definitely like. Just because you're athletic doesn't mean
Yeah.
you play a sport. Like
Correct.
it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
a sport.
What's that?
I don't know what that was. Just see, kind of peeping in there.
Look at what Blake's looking at.
What?
Oh.
All right.
Okay.
I think that's almost about all the time we have.
Yeah, we have to go get lunch
We're
soon.
running low.
Yeah, we're running out of time here, but let us know. Let us know your opinions.
Yeah, there's obviously some interesting. We had some
I
interesting
feel like we
opinions
still
in
haven't
there.
come to a true conclusion of what a sport and a sport is not yet. Just we're still kind of forming that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we want to start out. We want to talk about what sports, what aren't sports. But as it sits right now, everything we've talked about today is deemed a sport. Everything we brought up is a sport. Everything. That's
Yeah,
been,
everything we've talked about
As-
by
yeah,
the
is still a
Olympics,
sport.
it says
and it is
sport.
and it is currently recognized as so.
Yeah.
So if you think dancing was not recognized as a sport, I hate to break it to you, it is recognized
Break
as a sport.
dancing, baby. Olympics 2024. I'm gonna sign up for
is that getting your?
I'm signing up for that.
Oh, come
I'm
on.
definitely signing up for
You
that.
gotta get a little team.
Athletics in the Olympics is.
What do you
signing
think?
up
Us
for
three
that.
little trio breakdancers.
The big three.
Yeah.
Big three of
I could see a
breakdancing.
new big three in sports of breakdancing in the Olympics.
Why not?
I have